Hey, happy Halloween. I'm sorry for the odd look. I was just at a school Halloween party, and I was dressed as the Onceler, and I thought this was the simplest way to bring my costume down. So I guess I'm Andrew Horowitz now. That's fine with me. I guess it does make sense, though, that this is somewhat of a Halloween special, because what I'm covering today was released for Halloween just a couple days ago. 4 days ago as of filming this, actually. This is 3D Whisker, created by Domenico. If that name does not sound familiar to you, he also created the web series POSTAL, which is one of my favorite all-time series on the internet. So I was really interested when I read this, and I was kind of left wanting to kind of air out my thoughts and what I kind of think of what's happening in this after reading. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I kind of have some stuff written down here that I would like to go over. And I understand that not everything I say is going to be correct or agreed upon, but I know a lot of Tony's work, a lot of it is up to interpretation. So I guess this is what I'm thinking for this series. So yeah, before I start, please read 3D Whisker. Please. I love the stuff that Tony Domenico does. I think the sense of immersion with the atmosphere that he tries to create is impeccable. I think his work deserves to be seen by many, many, many people. So the first link in the description is going to be the story. So please read it first. It's only like half an hour. It's a series of screenshots, and that's the format that the story is told in. So there's no videos like PetScop at all. To people who didn't read before watching, shame on you. And also I'll just give a brief summary of the story so things can make sense as I go along. 3D Workers Island is a screensaver that consists of a small island with a fixed angle camera looking at it. There are 6 characters that move around on this island: Pat, Joe, Rebecca, Holland, Amber, and Grace. These characters interact in a way that is very randomized and unscripted for the time period that this screensaver was made. And this screensaver actually has a cult following around it who love it an almost unhealthy amount. They love just keeping it on and seeing what activities happen on the island. It's almost like a Truman Show type situation where people just kind of have it on in the background as they go along with their own lives. Except these are digital workers instead of an actual person. But people say that these workers interact in an oddly human-like way. This screensaver had such a cult following that there was even a website created named the 3D Whisker Discovery Boards. This was a joint information and forum website where the owner, also coincidentally named Pat, she would write about the screensaver and the known information about it, and there would be a forum for people to discuss the screensaver in various ways. There was also another site that was eventually created named Inside 3D Whisker that would pretty much become an enemy of the discovery boards, with the 2 admins, Pat and Singer, censoring all discussion of this other website. This other website details almost video game creepypasta-esque stories about the site, with it coming just short of blood coming out of the character's eyes. However, it does allege some very serious things, such as there being abuse material of seemingly real children being hidden within the screensaver, but there isn't really any proof given. According to the website, there are 2 very specific events that can happen in the game, and I will detail those later. However, like I said, the proof given is shoddy at best, and I will kind of go over more why I'm kind of skeptical about this Inside 3D Whisker website. So almost at the center of this story is this conflict between the discovery boards and Inside 3D Whisker. So I kind of want to go over both sides and what both ends are trying to say about the screensaver. Some very interesting things about 3D Whisker is that it does a very good job at poking holes in its own stories. So for instance, Inside 3D Whisker almost is laid out like a dark mirror of the discovery boards, and one thing that is notably absent about Inside 3D Whisker is the forums. The only way that new content gets added to the site is if the owner adds it, and you can submit emails, but the only things that are given are testimonials by other people that were emailed in. So there's almost this sense of feeling like these stories could very easily be fabricated because of them not coming directly from a user, but being kind of passed on by middleman, being the website owner. The second thing is that, as I mentioned before, there aren't really any solid screenshots of what is being talked about. There's only one notable screenshot that at least we are shown that shows anything close to what's being talked about, and it is very clearly, at least somewhat, photoshopped. So it almost feels like this website is just creating these edgy horror stories. And I kind of want to go over what this website is talking about, because I feel like that's a very primary thing to mention in this case. The thing this site first alleges that we see is called the PJR pin. And the idea of this is that if the characters Pat, Joe, and Rebecca all surround the character Amber, who is a child, in a circle, then the three people surrounding Amber will disappear and there will be a loud scream heard from the computer. And after this, the background is replaced by an image of seemingly a real child dressed in Amber's clothing being visibly abused. Now, of course, the website does provide multiple testimonials, but as I mentioned before, these are kind of hard to fully believe because of just this kind of feeling of it being like a video game creepypasta with how kind of out there it is. And the second event mentioned is called worker degeneration. Now, worker degeneration is the idea that the character Amber can slowly be tinted red, and then after a little bit, she's compressed into a red ball that just stays on the island. And it's kind of said that there's almost a muffled screaming noise coming from the balls. And this can happen over and over and over again. So you can kind of just have this cacophony of muffled screams with tens of red balls just dotted around the island for no reason. So now that we've talked about what is on 3D Whisker, I feel it's time we kind of start to theorize about who could be behind this. And I think there is one very likely suspect. On the discovery boards, he's known as Good Kid, and we are shown his involvement in 2 threads. And in this half, I will be talking about the first. So he gives this almost Reddit and then they all clapped story about how he got his computer lab teacher to put 3D Whisker on all of the computers in the computer lab as their screensaver. Now, I'm not saying this is fake. I'm just saying the way it's being told, it feels like one of those just stereotypically faked, exaggerated Reddit posts to make the OP feel good. However, in this post, he mentions that he got detention and that's why he was at school late. And somebody in the thread asks, well, what were you in detention for? Then Good Kid mentions that he was in detention for making up a fake skin disease and then talking about it in multiple instances of work across various subjects. And then he details the skin disease. And something that stands out dramatically to me about this made-up skin disease is that it is incredibly similar to worker degeneration. And realistically, this post would have been made before Inside 3D Whisker got the type of traction that it did, because Good Kid is almost seen as a martyr for Inside 3D Whisker because of the second thread he's involved with, which I will talk about in the next part of the video. So Good Kid mentions in that thread that he's 14 and he's like in middle or high school. So an edgy kid writing this stuff makes me think that he would almost like reuse stuff he's already came up with to apply it to different things like this screensaver that he's interested in and make up these types of stories. And I feel like the way of him only being able to put stuff to the website is almost him trying to get people to not say that it's fake. So in this interpretation, at least, I think Inside 3D Whisker is almost like a video game creepypasta that Pat on the discovery boards is trying to shut down because too many people are genuinely. Now, of course, there is the other end of the story. What if Inside 3D Whisker is real? This may sound relatively uninteresting to think about, but I think there's also a very strong line of evidence that can point to this being incredibly horrifying. So I think to start off, we need to talk about Pat Lawler, the owner of the 3D Whisker discovery boards. Pat is very interesting because she shares a name with one of the characters on the island. She mentions it being a coincidence, but it is just such an odd detail. There is some significance to her being named Pat. Well, in one comment, she mentions that she likes to think that Holland and Amber are the daughter of Pat, the character on the island, because she herself has two daughters. So she does liken herself with the character Pat in some way. This ties in pretty heavily to what Inside 3D Whisker is alleging, because the abuse that they talk about that Amber experiences is partially put on by Pat. And something interesting is that Pat constantly kind of demeans Amber a little bit for being lazy. I'm not going to say that this is a direct admission, but she mentions it enough to where it's definitely an intentional detail of Pat Lawler's character. Now, I have been omitting one thing so far that is a massive piece of evidence for this end of the story. And this is the second thread that Good Kid was involved with. See, this thread started to kind of dance around the subject of Inside 3D Whisker until Good Kid came in and made a very serious allegation. He said that he had family who lived near Pat Lawler and that she was a criminal and deserved to be in jail instead of running this website. And the tough thing about that is it's difficult to tell what's true about that statement. Again, there are two interpretations you can have. So let's just kind of go down the path of those. The first one, what if Good Kid is right? What if the mysterious origins of this screensaver and how Pat Lawler constantly mentioned how there was no sound for this screensaver was all a ruse to kind of put how she abused her own daughter into this game? And I think that's really interesting to think about, but I think there are some issues with that idea. First off, Pat said that she's retired. That would mean her kids have had to have been grown by the time that she was into 3D Whisker, which would be confusing to include those details and even pictures in something so far after the fact. The second thing that makes this a little bit hard to believe is that it's coming from Good Kid, someone who is known to be able to fabricate things about kind of edgy and creepy and horrific subject. Not just from the Inside 3D Whisker website, but I'm mainly talking about that skin disease. So I think very much the feud between the sites is up to interpretation because there are so many details that prove and disprove each side. But something I would like to talk about is the screensaver itself now. So here's my feeling about the screensaver, which I think is a pretty obvious detail if you are familiar with Tony's previous work. The 6 people in the screensaver are alive. We know that, right? I mean, that's why their interaction is so randomized and unscripted. Because these are real people trapped in the screensaver. Now, there are 2 pages that we see that kind of support this line of thinking. The first one is a seemingly completely unrelated page about Windows, not the operating system, Windows into different realities. And this page is borderline fucking illegible. I'm not joking. But I think this does give us a little bit of information about what we're looking at. In general, this page talks about Windows to reality, and it kind of talks in circles a lot. But something important that it mentions is the idea of screens, and how we can tell if something we're looking at on a screen is a window to a fictional reality or an actual reality. And something that kind of explains this even better is a graphic attached at the bottom of the website, which shows a computer monitor with 3D objects represented in 2D, and the computer monitor with the 3D objects represented in 3D, and then the computer monitor blank with the 3D objects outside of it. This graphic is clearly meant to show the idea that some things you may see on your computer are real life things. And what I think this is trying to get across are that the workers in 3D Whisker are real people. And there's a second, also seemingly out of place thing mentioned on the forum. This concerns the Macaulay Culkin movie, The Pagemaster. Specifically, this comment is in response to a thread about somebody's kid recreating the island from 3D Whisker for a school project. See, I wouldn't really know anything about recreating the island, so I can't really touch on that much further. But one of the replies mentions how their kid is terrified of 3D Whisker. And then there's another reply to that mentioning how kids always have odd fears, and talks about how one of their nieces is really scared of the Macaulay Culkin movie, The Pagemaster, which they say they don't blame her for, because the idea of drowning in paint and turning into a cartoon character sounds terrifying. That sounds like a person being trapped in a synthetic medium. That is what is happening in this story. It's a pretty clear-cut explanation, but I think there's another side to this that I want to mention. This program is fucking hypnotic. Like, people are so weirdly obsessed with this program. Not just the people on the discovery boards, but the people who believe in Inside 3D Whisker. They are so passionate about this program. But why? It's just a screensaver with a bunch of people moving around. Well, this is probably going to be my most far-fetched take about this thing, but I kind of want to get this out there. I think that in some way, the screensaver purposely tries to appease to whoever is watching. Now that sounds crazy, but let me explain. There are these people, like the admin of the site, the two admins of the site, who just keep this screensaver on all day because they love watching it. But there's also this phenomenon that we see where people kind of don't get it at first, but then get lulled in, as if the screensaver almost adapts to what they want to see. Because we see this idea that the screensaver is different for everybody, which almost reminds me of the personalized Mario 64 creepypasta, where in that case, there's kind of the idea of each copy kind of subtly adjusting to your mind and understanding what you like and how you are. And I think the screensaver is doing that. And I want to take this another step further. What if both sites are being truthful? So, imagine this. You are a good kid. You're using this screensaver. Beyond your knowledge, this screensaver is using what you enjoy to try to appease to you and to try to make you happy. This screensaver begins creating these horrific events because you are someone who often writes about very horrific ideas in a sense to be edgy, and you're fabricating these things. So then you create a website where you document these things. And then people read it, and they're curious to see it. So then the screensaver knows they want to see something like that and recreates it. But let's say you are the owner of a forum about how positive this screensaver is. You don't want to think about that type of stuff in it, and you don't believe it. So I think this is lesser so a story about hidden messages in a screensaver, and the more so the idea of a computer program causing warfare between two sides of the internet, or pretty much one side of the internet. It split it in half. There were the people who believed in the discovery boards, and there were the people who believed it inside 3D Whisker. But no matter how you put it, the discovery boards were dead after this. So a program that was designed to be this happy place for people caused so much turmoil that just split up this complete side of the internet. And nobody even knew what it was actually doing. So that's it for this video. I really enjoyed making this. I understand that this stuff will probably be out of date, or there will be better interpretations found for it. However, I just really wanted to get this out there because I'm really passionate about the work that Tony Domenico does, or at least specifically Petscop. I do want to read and play some of his other projects in the future. But when I saw this was created, I really loved the concept. And also, I apologize for the weird shooting location. I'm away at college, so I have to film in a study room because my dorm room is way too tiny. So that's it. I hope you have a good Halloween. Thanks for watching.